First of all, I must apologise for yesterday's over-enthusiastic approach to a rhetoric about Kier Starmer. Yes, it was my fault. I didn't check. I didn't double check. I read it, and then she said she'd follow up with evidence, and I put the video out too soon. It all uploaded quite quickly actually, which surprised me. It normally takes about 40 minutes. It was up in 10. Don't know why. So I must apologise. I don't intend to mislead anyone. And it's a pity our politicians don't take that route, isn't it, when they get something wrong. The amazing thing is, I've had loads of messages from lefties, picking me up for doing this video and, oh, you got it wrong. Well, I've yet to be proven that it's wrong. I just can't prove that it's right. So let's just leave that one, shall we? But they never make the same requirements on their glorious leader, do they? The person they rely on, their Kier Starmer. Oh no, he can say lie after lie, can't he? I mean, mine wasn't intentional, which is why I would apologise. But he deliberately, before the election, tried to persuade people that life would be better under Kier Starmer. That was his selling job. How he understood the plight of pensioners, then takes the winter fuel allowance off. I mean, that's it. You're over then for me. You're over then. And, students shouldn't have to pay for an education, but then wants to put student fees up. The way he's flung PAYE tax on businesses, small, medium and corporations. Lots of big corporate people who backed him still now look back and have buyer's regret because they're now faced with, some firms, £3 million a year extra tax bills. $3 million a year he's cost them. And these silly buggers were singing his praises. So, if I can apologise when I've got things wrong, why don't politicians apologise when they get things wrong? They don't. Why? Because they intended to get them wrong. They weren't wrong, they were just lies. That's the difference. There's a difference between an error and a lie. And politicians lie. And unfortunately, Kier Starmer has been proved to be one of the biggest. I've never seen anyone, the bits of clips you see on social media about him, it's absolutely frightening how much he's led the public on. The good news is that he's the best thing that can happen to this country at the moment because he's waking everybody up. All these people that have been... one of the biggest problems we've had is apathy. They're not people like you who are involved and watching my YouTube and going on Twitter and Facebook and following other podcasts. They're not the problem. You're not the problem. I'm not the problem. The problem is those that don't want to know about it. I got someone last week, pictures of herself in south of France with a glass of champagne. Oh, June, give it a rest. All right then, I'll give it a rest and I'll go to south of France and have a glass of champagne and see what a difference it makes. You need to keep telling people what's going on. On the flip side of it, there are one or two friends who are waking up to what's going on. And I do think moving forward, it's the centre ground that will have the destiny of this country in its hands. The ones that don't normally get involved with politics just come to life just before a general election and go and vote. So you have to appeal to them, 12 to 14 million votes there. And they're not as right-wing as us, and we have to accept it. Because they will be right-wing enough to get Kier Starmer out. That's all we need to do. And then get a government in that will sort out the civil service and nobble it. And obviously that's Farage's intention. Because the civil service are our main problem. Like I say about these hobby horse things, they're called hobby horse things, that the civil servant have these plans like furlough or the winter fuel allowance, and they bring it to the forefront to whichever leader's in charge and go, look, we've got this as an idea. Rishi Sunak is known to have rejected the winter fuel allowance plans. No, I'm not prepared to do that, and they knock it to one side, but they keep the plans in case some mush is daft enough to take them on board. CBDC, that was brought in by a civil servant from the Bank of England, but it's been pushed to one side. But Starmer's taken them all on board. These people you're watching on telly aren't smart enough to come up with some of the actual plans. Whether you like them or not is a different idea, but to put them together takes work and initiative. And Starmer hasn't got it. Starmer's a robot. Starmer is Mr. Woodentop. He's come from an institutionalised background. He's come from a human rights lawyer. I mean, you can see where your country's going with one of them in charge. Human rights don't seem to count when it includes Tommy Robinson, does it? Funny that. So I'm quite optimistic about the future because the best catalyst we've got for change is watching him try to undo this country and send our money overseas, which is out of order, and statements like legally it's unsustainable long term. Statements like that are very important. We'll have to see how it pans out. But the best catalyst for change is watching someone make something bad enough for people to take notice of it. And that is going on right now as we speak. We're not going to get him out of power. Well, we're not going to get Labour out of power. They're in, massive majority. Blame the apathetic. But it's bad enough that the apathetic will come out. The next election will be like Brexit too. Everybody will be out and they'll want to vote. And they won't want to vote for the Tories because they've done that for 14 years. No matter what Jenrick says about, you've got to remember a lot of Jenrick's rhetoric. You can't suddenly burst to life about immigration. Oh, it's terrible. You can't suddenly burst to life as a Tory about immigration when it's your party that came up with the idea of the contracts to put migrants in hotels. That was a Tory initiative. And the thing is, a lot of these hotels were dying anyway. They weren't good businesses. So you're not really a hotel, are you? If you're going to go out of business, because it's happened to one in Bournemouth, this hotel is going to go out of business because its migrant contract has ended. So you're not a hotel, are you? You're a failed business that's been clinging to life with our money, with our taxes. That's who you are. And some of these big businesses, like Britannia Hotels, who have got loads of migrant hotels, this is a good earner for them. These are faceless people you'll never see. And the Tories did it. It wasn't Labour, much as I'd like to blame Labour. Labour just have it all set up for them to continue using it. It stinks. So I'm sorry, Robert Jenrick, no matter how tough guy you sound now, why didn't you sound tougher beforehand? You started making rumblings towards the end when you could see that you were tanking support. But before that, you weren't. So how can you trust a Tory? That bloody silly picture of Reform with all the people in the clouds. Oh, come and join us, Nigel Shafty's and all. Have you seen how many of them are Tories who went to Reform to become MEPs and then 2 months before a general election reverted back to Tories? One of them's Jacob Rees-Mogg's sister. The Tories are always round when something's collapsing. When you think you've just got hold of something, like UKIP, it's always the Tories that are around at the time. Just notice that. I mean, Kier Starmer is just fortunate that the Tories were that bad, they just set everything up for him. So even when it went even worse, they won't be handling the country on a war footing. This lunatic won't have us in a war. It doesn't know he's playing with fire, but he won't be at the front line. Will it be your kids, your grandkids at the front line? This is a man who, the dangerous thing with him is messing around with this war situation. And, don't put anything past them. If we get to 2029 and we have the opportunity to vote him out, then we take it. But who's to say what he's going to do? I mean, surely to God, with Trump, nobody was, not one politician. Look back on the sound bites. Before Trump was elected, no politicians used the word peace. They all talked about how they needed weapons, and they all talked about how they needed support, and they all talked about how they needed to perpetuate it. They didn't talk about peace. None of them. We've got a loony in charge as far as I'm concerned. We need to keep an eye on him. But we've got quite a long road, and what's happened with Reform is just a puncture on the journey. Don't sweat it. It's not happening in the real world. This is an interesting statistic. There was a branch meeting of Reform the other night. One of the ladies that runs this particular branch said, June, you'll never believe it. We had a massive turnout, new people, a lot of them young, and no one had heard of the rift because they don't follow social media for politics. So I said to the other branch manager, he's a bloke, I said, do us a favour, when you sit down and you start speaking, can you just ask them who follows will they follow the politics? Just say, do you follow social media? You don't have to be specific. And about 20% put their hand up. Do you know why they were there? They were sick of Kier Starmer. Most of them former Tories that were disgruntled because they haven't had conservatism. they were sick of Kier Starmer. He's one of the best employees for any party that wants change, because nobody's going to want him. Maybe the multicultural section of London and the NHS, but even that's dwindling because he's taking jobs off them. Oh, there's a pay rise, I'm taking your job off you. You know, the man isn't interested in Britain. That's quite obvious. He's a member of the Fabian Society. Google him. I'm sure you all know about it because I read your comments. You're a pretty savvy crowd. So what we have to do is remember who the real enemy is here and focus on that, and just let the infighters get on with it. It'll sort itself out. And I've not lost any hope at all for the future. I'm just glad everybody's waking up, because it's been a bloody long journey for me. I've only been on YouTube 6 months, but I've been doing this since 2015, when a lot of people were calling me a nutcase then, because I said Theresa May would invoke Article 50. I knew it, so I kept saying it, even though I got lambasted. I said, no, you're wrong, she's going to invoke it. I knew that was on the cards. Not a good leader, but she still invoked it. Told everybody that the Labour Party were tanking support when the media kept saying, no, it's neck and neck. No, it's not. They're tanking support. I look at my messages. That's the difference. I read your comments and I look at my messages, and that's how you get a feel for what's going on. And it's important to get a feel for what's going on for people who think like us, because we know what the left think, so we don't. It's all over media. They've captured the media, so we know what they think. So we don't need to investigate. But the best feedback I've had is from my messages, and it's still the same. Labour will not get a second term. So TikTok,